Today, we're going to do some time traveling. We're heading back to the 1600s, to a London of power, plague, and fire. A city that was on the very brink of monumental change.
I mean, really think about that for a second. What if you could actually walk its streets, see its long-gone landmarks, and just feel the energy? It's a pretty amazing thought, right? To witness a world that has, for all intents and purposes, completely vanished.
Well, believe it or not, that's kind of what we're going to do. We're using AI to animate old historical paintings and engravings, which lets us get as close as we possibly can to exploring this lost city. So think of this less like a dry history lesson and way more like a virtual tour.
And the city we're visiting, it was no small town. We're talking about a booming metropolis of nearly 500,000 people. To put that in perspective, that made it a dense, fast-growing powerhouse, one of the absolute largest cities in all of Europe at the time.
Okay, so let's start our tour where all the action was, at the very center of it all. We're talking about the main artery of the city and its only river crossing, the legendary Old London Bridge.
Just look at this. It really forces you to rethink what a bridge even is. See, Old London Bridge wasn't just a slab of stone to get you from point A to B. No, it was an entire neighborhood, packed with houses and shops and even chapels, all just suspended, almost precariously, over the churning River Thames.
The bridge really was the whole city in miniature, you know? It had so many jobs at once. It was a vital commercial route, a crowded residential street, and a seriously impressive gateway for anyone arriving from the south. In every way that mattered, this was London's beating heart.
And what's fascinating is that the bridge was really two completely different worlds. You had the world above, all the chaos of city life, the traffic, the commerce, and the constant threat of fire. But then there was the world below. The bridge's stone arches basically created a death trap, turning the Thames into this raging torrent that would just wreck boats and drown sailors.
And you gotta understand, that river below was London's lifeblood. The Thames was the city's main highway, carrying everything from local grain to fancy global imports. And that made the bridge this critical intersection where the bustling neighborhood above met the powerful currents of world trade below.
All right, leaving the commercial heart of the city behind, let's head upstream to Westminster. This was the epicenter of England's political, religious, and royal power.
So, here's the thing about Westminster. Power wasn't just in one building. It was this whole complex. You had the Palace of Westminster, where Parliament was starting to seriously challenge the king's authority, and that was setting the stage for a civil war. Right next door, you have Westminster Abbey, representing centuries of religious and royal tradition. And tying it all together, the Westminster Stairs, the grand river entrance to all that power.
Now, if Westminster was where power was debated, the Tower of London was where it was brutally enforced. This place was everything: a fortress, an armory, a treasury, and of course, England's most infamous prison. It housed everything from the crown jewels to political prisoners. The tower was this terrifying, formidable symbol of the state's absolute control.
Of course, the royals didn't spend all their time cooped up in the city. They had these incredible retreats, like Richmond Palace, which was a favorite spot because the air was cleaner. And it was right here, in 1603, that Queen Elizabeth I died, which actually marked the end of the entire Tudor dynasty. A huge moment.
Back in the city, there was this one street called Cheapside that pretty much served as a public stage. It was a place of incredible contrasts. One day you might see a grand royal procession, but the very next day, that same street could be the site where all those simmering political tensions just boiled over into a full-blown protest.
And speaking of tension, all of that was nothing compared to the catastrophe that would define the century for London. In 1666, the medieval city that had stood for centuries would be almost completely erased from the map.
You know, in a lot of ways, London was just an accident waiting to happen. The whole city was a tinderbox, a maze of narrow streets packed with timber-framed houses. It had all the fuel and all the oxygen a tiny spark would need to become a raging inferno.
And that is exactly what happened. It started small, but within just 2 days, the entire city was engulfed. Even the massive stone cathedral, St. Paul's, couldn't survive the intense heat. In just a few days, literally centuries of history just turned to ash.
An observer at the time described the scene with this chilling simplicity. He just said London appeared as a continuous wall of fire. Wow, it's almost impossible to imagine the sheer terror of witnessing something on that scale.
But here's the crazy paradox. The Great Fire was an absolute catastrophe, no question. But it was also a turning point. It basically wiped the slate clean. By destroying the old, cramped medieval city, it forced London to rebuild and gave it a chance to completely reshape itself for a new era.
So, after all that destruction, after all that change, does any of this 17th century world even survive? Well, as we're about to see, the echoes of this lost city are still all around us.
You know, the person who created the historical reconstructions we've been watching, they put it perfectly. There's this deep feeling of wanting to experience the past firsthand. And right now, these amazing digital tools give us the closest glimpse we might ever get.
And here's the cool part. That past is so much closer than you think. If you walk down a street like Cheapside in London today, you are literally walking the exact same route that people did back in the 1600s. Sure, the buildings have changed, but the ancient street plan is still there, like a ghost of the old city hiding in plain sight.
And that kind of leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? History isn't just locked away in books or museums, it's written into the very layout of our streets, the names of our neighborhoods. So the next time you're out and about, take a closer look around. What echoes of the past can you find in your city?